And we're live.
All right, great. Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. I apologize for the couple of seconds of delay while we got everything up and running here, but I'm glad to be able to speak with you this evening. I hope everyone is safe and well. I hope you're enjoying your summer to the extent that it's possible. I hope that as many of you got through the storm 2 weeks ago safely as possible, and that you didn't lose power for too long, and that it wasn't too disruptive to you. So this is the first of a series of actually 4 meetings that we're doing to engage both our staff and the public in our efforts to try and reopen schools for the fall. Yesterday, last night, we had a similar meeting with staff where we took a number of staff questions over the course of the last several days and tried to answer as many of those as we could. We're doing the same thing, obviously, tonight with the questions that you have posed to us. We've grouped them thematically. There were over 400 questions, but a lot of the questions were similar in nature and similar in theme. So we'll spend a little bit of time doing that. But before we get into the questions themselves, I just want to say parenthetically to start things out, how proud I am of what we have accomplished as a community over the course of these last 5 months. For those who have been part of our task force, we had a community task force of almost 100 people, including leaders in our parent community, our staff, teachers, administrators, the people who support us, our consultants, all part of the effort to help us start to build plans to reopen safely. And I'm proud of us pulling together as a community back in the spring. One of the things that I didn't know was going to happen as we went into the closure period and virtual learning and our worries about the pandemic, it was unexpected to see particularly how our students decided to use what could be tragedy as instead opportunity to do great things in their community and in the world. And I'm just so inspired by all of the work and the effort that they put into trying to use this time for good. And it's been my privilege. I've been very proud to share with the community a lot of the things that the students have been doing. I'm also proud of our staff for how quickly they pivoted to virtual learning in the spring. We obviously did not have a lot of infrastructure prepared for that. It was not something that anyone had anticipated. And it was also not something that we knew we were going to have to do for months on end. But we pivoted quickly. We made the best of it. We know that virtual learning has room for improvement. And as we talk about what the fall is going to look like, you'll see that we've tried to make some of those improvements. But I think we also, and particularly now as I have a better sense of how other districts responded in the spring, I'm very proud of the effort that we put forward, and I'm proud of how hard our staff worked to make that happen. I just want to talk a little bit about the timeline of the work that we've been doing. So even though we have been working literally since we closed on thinking about how to reopen, we have been waiting for a lot of guidance from the state in order to make a lot of the decisions that we needed to make. And that guidance has been coming out over the course of the summer and even continues to shift as the summer moves on. But the main guidance that we got from the state didn't arrive until the middle of July. And that's guidance from both the state health department, which advises us on health issues, and the state education department, which is advising us on programmatic issues. And then the decision from the governor of whether we would or would not reopen this fall came officially on August 7th. So we have been moving quickly since we got the guidance to start to build plans that conform to that guidance. And then we were awaiting anxiously the governor's decision to know whether we would start to execute on those plans, and also a number of the infrastructure investments that we would have to make wouldn't make sense to do if we weren't reopening. But since the governor decided we would be reopening, now we're moving as quickly as we can on those infrastructure investments so that we can have them in place before the start of school. All of which has been about doing an incredible amount of work in a very short amount of time. And I'm very fortunate to be joined tonight and you may not know a lot of the staff who are doing a lot of this work. And so I'm going to get a chance to introduce them to you, but also to thank them for the leadership that they've provided in each of their various areas, because this undertaking has literally been about trying to create two different parallel school systems where one existed before, a new parallel socially distanced school system and a new virtual school system that operate in tandem. You can't have a virtual school system without having an extraordinary technology department. That department for us is led by Ms. Christine Payne, who for most people is the wizard behind the curtain, but tonight we're pulling back the curtain so that people can acknowledge the great work that she's done building our infrastructure, doing training around for teachers, and also procuring better tools for teachers so that they can deliver a better instructional experience in the virtual world. Dr. Rufo, Tricia Rufo, is our school business official. Among other responsibilities she has are food service and transportation. Those have been incredibly complicated. Food service in particular has operated the entire time we were closed. We have provided literally hundreds of meals a day to members of the community that might not have had meals otherwise. And we have kept that going throughout the course of the entire pandemic, despite a number of challenges logistically in doing that. Dr. Joseph Lamelza is our Director of Pupil Personnel Services, Assistant Superintendent, responsible for not just all the services that we provide to special education students, but the social and emotional health. School psychologists work with him closely and has been doing a lot of thinking about how to transition us back safely from a mental health perspective after these what are undoubtedly traumatic months for a lot of our young people. Dr. Teresa Curry is our newest assistant superintendent. She'll be taking over the role that was previously held by Ms. Joanne Mannion. She'll be assistant superintendent for instruction, but for the course of the last 2 years, she has been our executive director of human resources and helping us plan for the staffing needs that we'll have in the fall in a year that's very unusual for us. Joining her is Charlie Cardillo. If you haven't met Mr. Cardillo, he is the beloved former superintendent of the Manhasset School District. He's agreed to come on and join us for a year as the interim deputy superintendent. Ms. Bavard has announced her retirement. She'll be leaving at the end of the month. And Mr. Cardillo would be in her place until we've found a permanent successor for her position. And lastly on the screen is Mr. Greg Hamilton. And I've just gone in the order that they appear on my Zoom window. So this is in no particular order. I suppose I could have alphabetized them. Mr. Greg Hamilton is our Director of Operations, Executive Director of Operations, and he is responsible for, among other things, our facilities and all of the extraordinary work that we have been putting into our facilities. We have already been in the midst of several very large construction projects, any of which on their own would be a full-time job to manage. We were in the process of upgrading bathrooms. We did a number last summer. We're doing more this summer. And we're also putting into place a very extensive air conditioning project that's been in the planning stages for several years now. All of those have been Mr. Hamilton's responsibilities. And as we're moving forward now quickly with some of the infrastructure projects that we hope to have finished in time for the start of school, that also has landed on his plate. So with all that said, you know, the governor asked us to hold these meetings with our community prior to the 21st of August. And I think the timing is great from the perspective that it gives us the opportunity to give you an update on where things stand. But as I said last night to the staff, who also have a lot of questions, many of the questions don't have answers yet. And an undertaking of this level of complexity, we should not anticipate having our homework done 3 weeks before it's due. This is going to be something that we will be working on at greater and greater levels of detail as we get closer and closer to the start of school. There are still very big pieces that need to be finalized and put into place. And our work plan over the course of the next 3 weeks is to continue finishing some of the bigger pieces so that we can work our way down to the more and more fine-grained decisions that have to be made. But with each passing day, we're making more decisions and moving forward so that we get closer and closer to our goal of opening schools on September 8th. What I want to say is this is also a work in progress. And just as we are refining our decisions, there may be decisions that we decide to change between now and the start of school, either because new guidance will come out from the state education department, new research will come forward on how the coronavirus works and how we should be responding to it. Other school districts may have great ideas, and we will steal them shamelessly. So we'll be evolving as we move along, but it's all in the service of having the best possible experience for our young people, the safest possible facilities and program for our staff and our students alike. Physical safety is at the foundation of all other safeties, and we take that very seriously here in Syosset. And a lot of the effort that we've been making while we're building what we hope to be a great program for students, we're also trying to build the safest environment we possibly can. For those who have heard me speak at the board meetings, I've said repeatedly, and I'll say again, we cannot eliminate all risk. We will try to reduce risk as much as we possibly can. And we won't stop just when school starts. If there are other things that we can continue to do throughout the course of the year, we will absolutely continue with that. Our job is to try and mitigate any of the risks that we can, any of the risks that can't be eliminated. And then also, obviously, to have a great experience for students as our young learners. So your questions have been helpful because even though we've put out a reopening plan and we put out an extensive frequently asked questions document, and we have a number of presentations to the board, questions still crop up. And so those look to me like opportunities for us to do a better job communicating. So as you share with us the things that you're still unclear about, it allows us to be a little bit more crisp in our descriptions and our explanations of what's going on. So lastly, I just want to make a point. And I was on a Newsday webinar this afternoon with the Nassau County Health Commissioner, a local infectious disease doctor, one of our school nurses who did a great job, and somebody from a bus company, not the one that is used in Syosset. And I made the point that we're all in this together. And the only way this works is if we all look out for one another. And I've been searching for the perfect metaphor for this. The best one I've come up with so far is a barn raising, where if an entire community comes together and everyone does their part, in the end, you can have something incredible and lasting that comes as a result of that. What we know from what reopening is going to look like, not just here, but in other places that have reopened, is that the decisions that we each individually make will affect not just our own families, but the families of everyone around us. And so we have to make decisions that prioritize our learning community first, even if they inconvenience us personally or they aren't exactly what we would have wanted to do. But we have to make our decisions about what our priorities are. And it means that there are going to have to be some, I'll call them sacrifices, but they're really good decisions. If you have, as a staff person, if you don't feel well, don't come to school. We'll find somebody to cover for you. And as a parent, if your child isn't feeling just right in the morning, don't send them to school either, because in all likelihood, it's not something that we have to be really nervous about, but we would rather not take the chance. And by making those kinds of decisions, we protect one another. Students, when you're not on campus, are going to have to still be safe. And just because we're not watching over and making the rules about how to behave and how to be safe around one another, the virus doesn't care whether you're at school or somewhere else. We have to be safe everywhere we are. And by being safe everywhere we are, we make everyone safe. It doesn't matter how much we clean the buildings. If something unsafe happens outside the buildings, it'll come back in. And so this is where we have to really pull together as a community. We have to all be smart. We have to all be safe. We have to all be cautious. And as Dr. Syed, one of the panelists, said, we have to practice the 3 W's. Wash your hands, watch your distance, and wear your mask. And if we do those 3 things, we will have eliminated so much of the risk that confronts us. So with that said, as just some opening statements, I do want you to hear from the people that have been working so hard on building this plan. And I want to start with a number of the questions that are around instruction, because we'll certainly get to the health and safety questions, but we are first and foremost a school. And we are absolutely planning for students to have a wonderful year this year, whether they're in person or virtual. And to describe the building of both of those programs, I've asked Mr. Cardillo to take us through the work that he has been doing and Ms. Bavard have been doing with the building principals.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Rogers. Just a quick thing. just as a follow-up to Dr. Rogers' comments. For those of you who don't know me, I had been, as Dr. Rogers said, superintendent in Manhasset schools for many years and high school principal for many years. But probably the greatest accomplishment is in the 45 plus years in public education. My wife and I have had 6 great sons that actually really helped me to keep focus, a very student-centered focus on as we work through, school matters, whether for my own children or your children or the children of where I worked at both Manhasset and Sachem. So I want to start off with that as a perspective because as Dr. Rogers described, we all know we're going through an extraordinary time. Many people are anxious. And I think as we look at, I want to give a picture of opening day on that Tuesday, September 8th, that maybe we can all take and be part of to help ensure that the children who arrive at our 7 elementary schools that day have a incredibly joyous day filled with laughter as they start their first day in a very extraordinary time in the history of our country. So let's give a little background to how we can get to that and how we can all contribute to that, because I think really it's the adults who can really influence in a positive sense how the children can really take full advantage of what we have to offer here this year at our 7 great elementary schools. And I first need to recognize really the outstanding leadership team that we have as principals in our district: Jeff Casper, Leah Pallas, Lisa Greiner, Mei Zhong An, Mary Colkhorst, James Connolly, Chad Snyder. They have worked tirelessly this summer in really trying to put together the schedule ultimately that we have put together. And let's take a minute to see how we got there. Dr. Rogers and Ms. Bavard led a task force of 100 people. And as we got into mid to late July, we shifted gears after doing thoughtful examination of the models that we were looking at, particularly a hybrid model, whether it be alternating day or half day for our students. And when we made that shift, it was a dramatic one that put great amount of pressure on our 7 principals in order to have to move away from the schedule that they had put together and then delve into what we call an all-in-person schedule for our students. And it was reinforced by the fact of the survey that Syosset did, where we saw that 75% of the parents said you wanted your children in school. So in order to do this, we really, meaning we, our central office team, had to work with your outstanding building principals here in order to take obstacles out of the way and so on. So if we went back a year ago, the traditional setup would have been what we have known for years, right? 22, 23, 24 students in an elementary classroom, but things have changed since March. And so now we have social distancing guidelines. So social distancing guidelines put tremendous constraints on how we could get all students into the elementary school. And in doing so, having to utilize spaces before that we hadn't used for our traditional program. So again, I emphasize that the principals worked tirelessly there. And basically what you're going to see in the questions that were raised, there were questions related to the classroom teacher and the co-pilot. So let's take a second just to take a look at this as the students have come off the bus, they've been driven by their parents, the teachers are cheering them on as they come into the school, there's joy, there's laughter, and now they sit down in a room that maybe last year would have had 24 students. This year, based upon the square footage and the social distancing cap, there may be, depending upon the school and the square footage, 13 students, 14 students, 15 students, 16 students. But there may be 24 students all total in that. So what we've done is in many of the instances, but not all, develop something where we take our teacher of record, experienced teacher, and we have a co-pilot, and they could be in 2 adjacent rooms. And the responsibility of that experienced teacher, the pilot, is to maneuver at times back and forth between those 2 classrooms, giving the opportunity for students in classroom A or classroom 1 to be working on ELA and math. And at the same time, a little while later, stepping into classroom 2, working with those students as potentially the co-pilot moves into the other room. And there's all sorts of different variations off of that of how we can take advantage of this co-pilot position that we have And again, the structure that we put into place is really the one that allows us to have the all-in model that's in place. I think you realize with 124 districts on Long Island, not every district could do this. If we take a step further as we go through this, and as you go through the building, I know some people have asked, can we give an image of the building and so on? They're all beautiful buildings. And just because of the fact that we've had to manage the fact and put 14 or 15 desks in, doesn't take the fact that there can be really high quality instruction going on, a high level of sensitivity for the students who are in each of the classrooms, and providing the kind of support that you would expect it to have, be in place, whether we're September 2019 or September 2020, despite the fact that you may have your own concerns, anxieties, and so on. I think one thing that you're going to see is different is that there is already 635 students on the elementary level whose parents have chosen them to make that difficult decision to be involved in the virtual program. So what does that mean as we take a look at really the impact on the in-person program? It means that in schools like South Grove, which maybe was approximately 400 students in projected enrollment, is now down to around 260, 265 based upon approximately 140 students in South Grove not attending the in-person program, but their parents choosing to have them be involved in the virtual program. And we'll talk a little about that in a little while. Dr. Curry, at any time, feel free to join in. And again, if we look at some of the other schools as we go through this, Robbins Lane in particular and Village, they also had large numbers of students where the parents have chosen to have the children not participate in the in-person program. And they each had over 100 students at this point in time, and that's number growing, around 114 at Robbins Lane and 108 at Village, not participating in the in-person program. So let's take a look to see then, as we've developed at the same time, we'll come back and forth in my conversation related to in-person and virtual. The other four schools that we're looking at, Willits and Whitman, are going to join together and pair up to offer a combined virtual program, because the number of students not participating in the virtual program combined, it's necessary to do that because by their own, they didn't really have the numbers to run the program. And the same holds for Ballas and Berry Hill, who are pairing together and will run a program of approximately 6 sections. I think we're projecting around 33 sections, virtual sections, among the 3 independent programs, meaning the ones South Grove, Village, and Robbins Lane that are running their own programs, and the 2 that have paired together. Let's flip back again to the in-person program. If I'm going too fast, slow me down, but I think you can keep with me as we go through this, in that if we go back to in-person, I think you're going to see the following through the school year. You'll see your typical emphasis on ELA and math and science and social studies. But then you'll see then during the course of the day that teachers in music and art and world language will have to be pushed into the in-person classes, because we've had to use really the full space in each of the 7 schools in order to allow this to go on, whereas previously the world language teacher or the music teacher or the art teacher would have had their own space. For the most part, that's not the case. And you'll see then they're having to be pushing in to the different classrooms. The final point of emphasis as we go through this, as we look at a day in the life of the students at the 7 schools, is with lunch and recess, there's some changes that will have been taking place during the school day related to these programs. Lunch will be held in the classroom, and we'll have time where other people will take place, will contribute to the whole notion of the face mask and things of that nature. I'm focusing in on the broader picture now. So students will be eating lunch in the classroom, and then ultimately they'll have recess. And yes, in recess, we're hoping they can have a good time with social distancing being part of that experience of having a good time. And I'm confident that the same kind of opening comments that I made related to joy and laughter can still be in place as the youngsters go outside during recess as we go along the way for that. And then finally, let's flip back over to the virtual program with 33 sections involved in the 5 programs that we're running, we then have to make sure that the individuals that are involved in that program, they are all Syosset teachers. Some of them have been on the staff and they're experienced teachers who will be teaching in the virtual program. Others will be new hires that we're confident that can also be teaching in this program, or also serving as a co-pilot in the in-person program. And again, we can have more on that as we go through this. Finally, some people have talked about the music program. We know that the music program in Syosset is outstanding. It's highly valued. And so at the secondary level, we're able to more closely replicate what the students have had in previous years. And even at the secondary level, meaning the high school and middle school, we're not able to get full replication. But as we look at music at the elementary school for this year, and obviously we're hoping that the 2021 and 22 year allows us to go back to the model that's always existed, where students in the ensemble programs can come in from 8:30 to 9:15 and so on. Right now, as we work with Michael Salzman, our director of music, and as we work with the principals, we don't see that to be the case for this year. And we know that's a disappointment then for the youngsters and so on as we go through it. But efforts being made during the in-person program to provide opportunities for the students who are in the music program to have lessons go on for band and orchestra and do those kind of things. And again, for us to do this with the constraints, the room constraints that we have that are brought on by the social distancing is an extraordinary challenge. So again, we'll see different variations of that as we go from, let's say, South Grove to Whitman, on our way to Bayless, Robbins Lane, and so on. So our goal is that we can offer the music lessons in band and orchestra and have spaces that are appropriate spaces available. But again, that's going to differ from building to building as we go through this. And I think for now, I think that captures in essence what we're envisioning from day one, and then as we move on. So two more other comments. I'm hopeful, and Dr. Rogers is hopeful, that everyone gives the in-person experience the opportunity to go through week one, go through week two, go through the month of September. Allow us to make adjustments. Allow us to, work with the principals where we see we can make some modifications. We do that. We feel confident. Our in-person program in Syosset has been second to none. So we can able to keep that tradition despite the constraints that have been posed upon us because of the virus and so on, but that we can still keep that tradition of the in-person being an outstanding program in each of the 7 schools. And the second aspect and closing aspect really becomes that when we look at arrival dismissal time, and I guess we'll have opportunity to come back to these later on again, we're meeting with the principals, myself, our head of security, and we're taking extensive time to really work out the logistics of what it takes to make for an appropriate arrival time and an appropriate dismissal time that really factors in health and safety as the most important aspect. And so we're meeting individually with the principals to work these plans out. We're in the midst of that right now. And so those details ultimately will come to you through communication from the principals as we get, prior to the beginning of the school year. And you'll get a better sense of really what the game plan is. But again, like any game plan, and anyone knows really how a game plan is, the key thing is that we stick to the game plan when it's working. And when we feel there needs to be some tweaks, we make modifications. And hopefully you as the parents respect the modifications that we can make in order to do what we consider, for what I started with, is the best interest of your children. So that's it for now. Thanks.
And actually, may I jump in for a moment?
Yeah, great.
The term co-pilot is a new term for us. So if I can give some assurances as well as some background as to who these individuals will be in the classrooms with our children. please rest assured that most of these co-pilots will actually be familiar faces to your children. They are New York State certified teachers with many years experience that have functioned in a variety of capacities in our schools, most of whom have been working as the term we give for tutors in the school. So they are familiar faces, they know the culture, the norms, they know your kids. And that is a very important factor, because whether the child is in the class that is supervised, taught by who is called the co-pilot, or the individual designated the pilot, the experience is going to be identical. It will be robust, it will be rich, it will be student-centered, and it will be to the expectations that we all have for the experiences that our children will get in our elementary classrooms. And that is true whether we are talking about the in-person instruction or the virtual instruction. So our children may see a few new faces in there, and for those new faces that we have hired, again, Syosset has very high standards. We have a very intense vetting process and very high expectations for any new staff that we're bringing on, as well as a very close supervision model. So what I want to be able to do, what we want to be able to do, is to give you that comfort, that assurance that whichever class your child is in, whoever happens to be either in front of the classroom or across the virtual screen, that they are going to be getting the education, the level that they deserve and that we expect from Syosset. Our new hires have come to us from a variety of locations, many with many years experience, not only because of the value and the reputation that Syosset brings, but because our good fortune is also the fact that unfortunately other districts, due to their financial constraints, have had to let some outstanding educators go. So their loss is certainly Syosset's gain. So if I could just reiterate that the individuals that will be providing instruction for your children are first class, top-notch teachers and instructors, and to give you those assurances in this time.
Great. We'll circle back a little bit to the general education elementary program. I know there are a number of questions that were sent in that we can go a little deeper on, but I'd like to shift to the special education program for a moment if we can. So Dr. Lamelza?
Certainly. Thank you, Dr. Rogers. Good evening, everyone. So let me start by saying that it is our intention that every service that's listed on the IEP will be delivered. The only limitation that we would have, to the greatest extent possible, is a phrase that I'm using. We will provide those services to the greatest extent possible, limitations only being a result really of spacing, health, safety, staffing, any of those constraints that we may have to function under. But our intent really is, and I think that we're in a good position to do so, is to make sure that the IEPs, as agreed to during your annual review meetings for those parents that are familiar with the special education process, will be fulfilled. Certainly as we move forward, if there's any concerns about students' progress or the impact of disability on the students' functioning, we'll take a look at that. CSC will reconvene. We certainly will make any adjustments. What I do want to stress, though, is that, you know, we are in a temporary situation. It doesn't seem that way because it's been going on so long, but it really is not something that we are anticipating, I hope, for you know, multiple years ahead. So we don't want to create an IEP that is going to be reactive to this current situation, to this temporary situation. So our IEPs are driven by the needs of the student, given a normal, quote unquote, educational environment. But again, that's not to say that we won't make accommodations, we won't make adjustments as things occur. So I want to assure people that that is the case, and that's also true for the related services. So there have been some questions about, well, where will related services happen? Well, if there's space available and they're scheduled as a pull-out service, they'll be provided as a pull-out service. However, if again, space is we're unable to do that, then we're going to have to come up with some more creative notions, making use of technology, perhaps doing more push-in services, but the services will be delivered, and they'll be delivered again by our staff in a very effective manner. So there also was a question I know about our ICT, our integrated co-teaching model, and that is running and that will be running. And we, of course, will be splitting classes into the cohort model. but you need to understand that those two teachers, the special ed teacher, the general ed teacher, are a team. They are planning collaboratively. They will be working collaboratively in the sense that there will be co-taught lessons provided to those students in the class on a daily basis. You know, that is really the minimum that we're expecting. And again, the advantage of the co-teaching model is that we are able to address educational needs based on a disability within the general education model, within the general education program. So that still is the foundation of our program. So our ICT model is running, and as I said, there will be co-teaching as part of that model. The other concern I know people might be having is about our overall building level supports that we have in place. If you're familiar with our MTSS, multi-tiered systems of support, that will again be in place. We are going to be looking at student needs. Again, we're going to be filtering it through our new structure. One of the, I guess, the positives, if you can, in this new structure is that class sizes are going to be significantly smaller. So the teachers will have an opportunity to provide more attention, more focus on students within that smaller cohort. So the MTSS team will take that into consideration, but certainly based on performance, based on the data that we have, because we are still going to be collecting performance data. We are asking our teachers at the elementary level in particular to make use of the curriculum based measures that they have that go along with the curriculum, our TC, Teachers College, the Go Math program, we have our Ames Web program, and that really should be happening within the beginning of September so that we get a sense of where the students are. Our plan currently, and that is subject to change, of course, is in October to then administer our NWEA, our MAPS, our measures of academic progress, at which point we then will have a good picture of where the students are after having at least 3 to 4 weeks of instruction. And then we'll go again from there to make that decision based on performance if students need additional support in literacy and in math. So that will be in place, as well as, you know, our building level speech supports, our building level OT supports. They're all going to still be available. Again, as I said, there might be some change in structure to the greatest extent possible, I guess, based on those limitations that I already mentioned. And I know another factor is the whole social emotional piece, the mental health piece, as Dr. Rogers mentioned earlier. We've been very attentive to that. We have really strengthened our relationship with our community-based partner. We already have some plans in place to provide parent presentations to really help with the anxiety for parents and families in preparing to return to school, and there'll be more information forthcoming on that, but we hope to have something together before school starts. We are making strong use of our website. We have several little YouTube, if you will, videos in place that our behavior analysts have done. Our plan is to increase and enhance those by adding some from our psychologists and from our social workers to really address wellness and management of anxiety and just being able to cope with some of the situations. So those resources will be available, but I also want to stress that we are having our PPS staff available. So our psychologists will be available, our social workers will be available, our counselors will be available, certainly at the secondary level. But we are looking at really focusing specifically at the elementary level by doing a little more proactive engagement. We have our SEL curriculum, our Stanford Harmony curriculum, that is still going to be instituted or provided and part of the program. We're going to be encouraging our PPS people to touch base with the classroom teachers, kind of do more outreach, sort of quickly monitor students, take a temperature, if you will, more of a mental health SEL temperature as opposed to a physical temperature, which we're going to be talking about because that's going to be a real reality. But we're going to really keep a close tab on students, and we need you as parents to be a part of that conversation. Certainly let us know any of your concerns, reach out to us. And that goes virtual or in person, because we also plan to have the same attention in terms of SEL and mental health in the virtual model. So that's really our plan. And as I said, I think we're in a good position to move forward. We have a lot of supports in place. And as I said, we're going to be really strengthening our relationship with our community agencies so that we can have a more fuller sort of wraparound approach to help families in the community as well as in the school.
All right. Thanks you, Dr. Lamelza. Ms. Payne, I want to talk a little bit about the virtual world that we're building alongside. The technology backbone and infrastructure to that is obviously critical. We heard loud and clear from teachers this spring that they needed more powerful tools in order to do their best work. We've worked very hard at putting together something that we've nicknamed the Classroom to Go, which is a suite of tools. And Ms. Payne has put that together, done a lot of training with teachers around it. If we could talk a little bit, please, about the Classroom to Go, but then also how students should be using their Chromebook, what to do. Do they bring it home? What do they do if it breaks? Should they bring it on the first day? If it has missing keys? All of those questions came through.
So the teachers spoke to me after this spring, and we talked about what we really needed to make it an even better virtual environment for teaching and for learning. And one of the things that we purchased in our, what we're calling our Classroom to Go package, is a laptop for teachers so that they have more processing power to do better, stronger virtual instruction. On top of that, we've added on a tablet so teachers can annotate on the screen, as well as practice handwriting for the students and work a little bit more interactively. We've provided a document camera to every teacher. A document camera is like a digital overhead projector. So the teachers will be able to work on paper or on whiteboard and be able to project that onto the screen as well. So our virtual learners and our learners that are in the co-pilot classroom that are engaging in the pilot teacher's instruction will be able to see what the teacher is writing and doing on the board. We have webcams for teachers. We're providing them with microphones so that their voice will be clearly heard. So we really reacted to everything that the teachers told us that they needed, and we worked very hard to make this Classroom to Go model. In which we hope this won't happen, but in the event that schools are closed down, that entire Classroom to Go model will be able to be taken home, and teachers will be able to teach the same way. So there won't be any regression for students and confusion about how lessons are going to go, because everything will be the same. The teacher can pick up and move from room to room with their Classroom to Go and have all of the powerful tools available to them. For students coming in the first day, they should charge up those Chromebooks and bring them in. It's going to be a new year for the elementary students, moving back and forth from school to home with a Chromebook. I'm perfectly confident that our digital age kids can handle this task. We ask that the parents help them find a spot where they can charge their Chromebook every night and they can bring it in. But not to worry, we're going to have plenty of charging stations that are socially distanced, so students will be able to plug in their Chromebooks if they need to. We're going to have live help for the parents and the students, so that if there's a problem with their Chromebook, they can just go onto the live help and get assistance. We are going to have a delivery service of repair if we need to, or a pickup location in the school if students are having problems with their Chromebooks. Our library media specialists are tuned into this and are going to be ready to go. So we're very happy to say that we are working towards a great, robust environment, and I'm really looking forward to this school year, because I think Syosset is doing it as Syosset always does, and it's the best.
Thanks, Christine. And I appreciate you mentioning the library media specialists. They have been kind of the unsung heroes of the spring. They have done a tremendous amount of work. They are our technology support in many of the buildings. They have been leading. They have been putting together lessons. They've been doing training for their colleagues. And they really have been the backbone of what we did back in the spring. And we're expecting the same amazing things from them this fall for students, whether they're virtual or in person with us. One thing that comes up a lot at Syosset is elementary lunch. So unsurprisingly, we have a lot of questions about elementary lunch. How will it work? Where will it be served? Will it be hot or cold? How will we do ordering? Will we do cleaning afterwards? And Dr. Rufo is in charge, among other things, of lunch. So I'm going to let her talk through how lunch is going to operate this fall.
Okay, thank you, and good evening. As Mr. Cardillo mentioned, elementary lunch will be served in the classrooms. So when we think about the lunch this year, it'll be certainly to start on much more limited options, and they will be cold options initially. To better prepare and in order for things to run smoothly, we're looking at a pre-order system for parents so that they can order meals, and then the meals will be delivered from the cafeterias on carts to the classrooms. And allergies are always a concern, and that's why we have our POS system that has allergy information. So before meals leave the cafeteria space, those will be run through the typical POS system, NutriKids and My School Bucks that parents are used to using. And so right now we're looking at several POS systems, and ultimately we're looking to implement one that will be very smoothly integrated with My School Bucks, but My School Bucks is still working on that. So we're looking at some interim solutions for ordering. After school lunch, after the lunch is served in the classroom, the monitors will be cleaning off the desk, trash will be removed from the classrooms, and then the students will have recess. So that's sort of how school lunches is going to be planned, and we're just talking elementary at this point. So I think one of the bigger changes will be a more limited lunch service, and the pre-order, which we had several years ago, will be back.
All right, Dr. Rufo, while you're at it, I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about busing, but I just want to preface Dr. Rufo's remarks on busing with this is something I said to the board last Monday night, has been a real challenge for us. When we surveyed parents, half of parents said that they were not going to take the bus. It would have been challenging to do busing with half the students, but when we asked parents to opt out, only about 15% of parents actually did opt out of busing. So we have almost all of the students that we would have planned for in a regular in-person normal school year, and we're trying to put them on the same number of buses, but have much more distance between them. Obviously, that's become a challenge, and we still don't have a nice, neat, clean package solution to that problem. So we'll talk through what some of those challenges look like, some of the work that we've been doing, but it's important to know that there's a finite number of buses. There was a shortage of bus drivers even before the pandemic, and our sense is that that shortage is going to be worse as a result of the pandemic and the demographic of our bus drivers in terms of their age. And so we're conscious of the fact that this is a limited resource that we can't use in the way that we used to use it in the past. And that's going to present us with some significant challenges. So we'll update you on where we are right now. But a lot of the questions that came in were about arrival times, dismissal times, how drop-off is going to work, how cars are going to drop off, can they be staggered? All of that is dependent on busing. None of that can be decided until we figure out what our ultimate plan is going to be on busing. And so this is still a challenge, but I want Dr. Rufo to go into a little bit more detail.
Well, you did a very thorough introduction, Dr. Rogers. The main levers in the equation of buses is really the number of buses and the number of students. And as Dr. Rogers said, initially when we were looking at numbers of about 50% of parents who were not comfortable considering putting their students on the bus, we had an idea of about putting a child on a bus about one per seat. However, when the numbers when parents were asked to fill out the survey, our numbers were not as high. Therefore, the one per seat doesn't work. So when we're faced with this, you can either make a decision to put more than one child per seat, which is permissible. All the children will be wearing masks on the bus, and also drivers will be provided masks should children present themselves at the stop without a mask. So again, one of the options is to alter the number of students we plan to ride the bus, or perhaps do a loop. So as Dr. Rogers said, the number of buses is finite and the number of bus drivers available is finite. So one of the options is to do what we call a double loop, so that if there were particular stops that had, or particular routes that had more children than we thought was ideal, we would send the bus out for a second loop. Obviously, doing that has implications on arrival times, and it can complicate both arrival and dismissal, and require an adjustment of times for those. So we continue to work out through different modelings. Our transportation supervisor is working with our software program, TransFinder, to route under different scenarios to try to determine what is the best mix of numbers of students and route times. We're also very mindful of, at each of the schools, of the potential changes in traffic patterns, and that more parents will be dropping off their students via automobile. So we need to be making decisions soon about the timing of buses and cars. I guess one of the other things we will be communicating is for procedures for students to board the buses and to exit the buses, and to be mindful at the stops of not congregating and to maintain social distancing at the bus stops. So those are the kinds of communications that we will be sending out while we work through our routing challenges.
Thank you. So a number of the questions have to do with health and safety, cleaning, building maintenance, et cetera. So I'm going to turn things over to Mr. Hamilton, who has been working literally around the clock on all of these construction projects, some of which had been in the works for years, but all of which end up being fortuitous in terms of how they help us better handle where we're coming in terms of the opening in the fall. So Mr. Hamilton?
Thank you, Dr. Rogers, and good evening, everyone. So this summer, we've been working with the construction teams, and the district staff have been doing a phenomenal job to make building improvements. Some of the building improvements are multi-year projects, which we just spoke about. We're doing a lot of renovations at the elementary schools for the bathrooms. So many of the elementary schools will receive new restrooms. Those restrooms will have touchless faucets, touchless toilets, touchless door openers, among other things, new tile, new floor, totally new bathrooms in selected buildings. We've also spoken about district-wide air conditioning. So we have a large project that is near completion, where the district is installing air conditioning in each classroom in every building. So that is nearing completion. It started probably right around the time that COVID hit us, and we've been working around the clock on that, and we anticipate that will be primarily done by the time school starts. And the rooms that will not be done, if we find that happens, those rooms will have window units. Some of the other work that's happening and that has occurred this summer is we've been working with our architects to walk the spaces and make sure that we're prepared for social distancing guidelines. So we've been working with the instructional leaders on that. And of course, the district staff have been performing maintenance, changing filters, and making sure that equipment is ready for when students and staff return in September. Some of the other things that are happening is The architects, in addition to helping us with social distancing, we asked them to perform an evaluation of our ventilation systems. So what they've done is they've actually did an assessment, building by building, area by area, and they look to ensure that we have the proper fresh air. So fresh air is something that the state has guidance on. And what they did is they looked at every space, and then they gave us a report that we are now working on. There are some areas that do not have adequate fresh air, and the Board of Education on August 10th passed an emergency resolution that is allowing us to complete that work before the beginning of school in as many instances as we can. I'm talking about rooms that may not have windows, they may not have proper ventilation, so we're expediting, those spaces. The state education department has an allowance for, and it actually encourages the use of fresh air. If not mechanical by nature, you could also meet fresh air standards by cracking windows and doing things like that. So, that's always encouraged. The one thing that the state education, unfortunately, has not allowed us to do, I've seen questions regarding keeping classroom doors open. They don't allow us to keep classroom doors open because the classroom doors are essentially fire rated. And having the door open essentially negates the fire rating of the corridor and of that space. So that was some guidance that SED has provided us with. What we're also doing is we're upgrading filters. So there is no standard filter level inside New York State. However, we've been working with our architects and engineers to upgrade filters to the highest possible level. So, what does that mean? So filters have a rating system called the MERV system. And the MERV system stands for Minimum Efficiency Reporting Value. It's a numerical system. A low number is not as good as a higher number. And so once you get between 13 and 16, you're approaching a superior level. And that's a level of filtration that is, approaching what you might find in a healthcare setting. So the district has been working to upgrade filters wherever possible to the highest level possible. In some instances, because of the equipment is newer, we're able to upgrade to a MERV 13 or a MERV 16. And some of the systems that, the systems are not as robust, we're going to upgrade it to the highest possible level. So those are some of the things that we've been doing on the facility side. Additionally, along with fresh air, we've been receiving questions about outdoor areas and tents, the use of tents. Tents are something that the state education department has been providing guidance on. And today a tent must be treated much like a building. So to install a tent on a premise requires us to go through a building permit. There are some abilities that we have to install some smaller tents, and we will be working with the building administrators to do that wherever possible. And in areas and places that need additional tents, we will be working with the architects to make submissions to the state education department to help meet the needs of students and staff to have outdoor areas. So we're working on that. There's always a lot of questions about cleaning. Cleaning is, it's probably one of the biggest ways to help ensure that we're, doing everything that we can to combat and fight COVID-19. So I want to, begin by letting, everyone know that the cleaning products that the district uses all meet New York State green cleaning standards. That really means that they're less toxic, they're non-toxic, and that's something that the district and all schools in New York State have followed for a number of years. And then the disinfectant products that we use to kill viruses, those all must be EPA approved. So everything that the district uses is approved by either New York State or the EPA. I wanted to just communicate that to everyone. And then this year, we're going to be rolling out the use of a new product, which is an antimicrobial product And that product helps to protect hard surfaces for a period of time, up to 90 days. And this is something that we're doing to help give us an extra level of protection against the virus. So we're going to be starting to use that in the next several weeks on all hard surfaces. That would be, desk and chairs and windowsills, things like that. And then throughout the day, the custodians will be performing an increased level of disinfecting. They will be disinfecting hard surfaces throughout the day. So that's something that is encouraged by the SED, and as well as the CDC. So the district staff have all the supplies to do that. We will also make supplies available to classrooms, supplies of cleaning products, supplies of disinfectant wipes that can be used by staff members. This district already has alcohol-based hand sanitizers in every space. So that's something that we had rolled out back in March. I think we started to actually go from a water-based hand sanitizer to an alcohol-based hand sanitizer, which is what the CDC recommends. I think that's pretty much it. Oh, the other thing that's new for us is we have purchased and we are receiving new tools to help us better disinfect. We're going to be utilizing electrostatic sprayers. We're going to be using other sprays and misters to essentially help the guys work more effectively. So these sprays help the disinfectant better stick to a surface and help the staff to do better cleaning. So these are things that we're going to be using for the first time this year. We've started to use it over the summer, and we're really excited by this. Thank you, Dr. Rogers.
Thank you, Greg. I really appreciate it. And even before all of this happened, Greg told me last fall that he and his team had decided that this was going to be 2019-20 was going to be the year that they wiped out influenza, and they had put into place a whole bunch of protocols to try and reduce the spread of influenza in the school. And it turned out that those were all exactly the right protocols that we needed to stop other airborne respiratory viruses. So we were a little ahead of the game. We didn't know the game that we were ahead of, but we had set that as a goal. Greg had set that as a goal for his department. And it did put us in a position to respond quickly. We had purchased even back in February some electrostatic sprayers and had started using those in the schools even before we had closed down for the pandemic. So a lot of the questions that we get are around protocols of what we're going to do health and safety wise if we have an identified case in a building, or if there's a staff member, or if there is a family member of a student, and how we'll respond. So I think I mentioned earlier, I was on a webinar, a Newsday webinar with the Nassau County Health Commissioner earlier today. He did actually what I thought was a terrific job of explaining how the contact tracing process works and the roles that the school and the health department each play in supporting one another in the event that there's an individual case. So, don't take it from me, take it from the health commissioner. If you have some time, I think it's well worth your while to watch. Not because I'm on it, but to hear him go through that contact tracing process. Our role is to support the county health department. Their role is to perform contact tracing. So what are we doing in order to support them? And why am I talking about contact tracing instead of just saying, well, here's what we're going to do if this happens? The reason is because there is no cut and dried answer to what happens if there's a case, because it depends on the nature of the case. It depends on the amount of time. It depends on the amount and level of exposure that people have to the case, whether someone is considered to be a close contact, which would be the most, the highest level of protection needed, approximate contact, which is much less risky, or not really a contact. And that determination gets made by the Department of Health. We support the Department of Health in a couple of ways. First, a number of our administrators and nurses have taken the Johns Hopkins contact tracing course. so that we're educated on all of the procedures that need to be followed by the health department so that we're best able to support them because we understand what they're trying to accomplish in their process. Second, we're going to be meticulous in our record keeping. So attendance logs, there shouldn't be very many visitors to buildings, but we'll have perfect visitor logs. We'll have a sense of where kids are throughout the day, what rooms they're in, seating charts, who they're near, who they're next to. All of these will help us ensure that if it's necessary to do some contact tracing, we'll be able to provide the health department with really fine-grained information so that they can make fine-grained determinations about who does and who does not need to quarantine. So he made a point of saying that there are some very specific terms that have to be used. Isolation is what happens to someone who is COVID positive. Quarantine is what happens to someone who is not sick, but was a close contact and potentially could be sick, potentially was exposed. And those are two different things. He made a point of distinguishing between those two. If someone is a close contact, they'll be informed. And this is another way where we support the health department. This is something we did back in March as we were shutting down. The process is going to work very similarly this fall. The health department will make determinations about who is or is not a close contact, and then we will support them in communicating to those individuals. So what we'll know is that there was a case somewhere in the school district, and then we'll be able to say that everyone who has been determined to be a close contact or approximate contact has already been contacted directly and informed what they need to do next. So if you haven't been contacted, you are not a close contact. The reason for that methodology is because of incredibly strict federal privacy laws that both we and the health department have to follow. So we cannot violate the private health information of any individual. We cannot communicate in any way that would make it possible to work backwards and figure out who might be the person that was who tested positive. So obviously there's always curiosity to know what the situation is, but ultimately what people need to know is there anything that I should be doing for my child? And we will always communicate with anyone who needs to do anything individually. We will move as fast as we can. The nurses, administrators are prepared to go very quickly. The Department of Health has identified a high-level, a high-ranking contact in their organization that will work with schools and be immediately available to us so that we'll be able to work quickly with them. The health commissioner mentioned that the testing centers by law are required to disclose any positive case that comes to them to the health department so that they can immediately start the contact tracing process. We are also, a number of questions came through about testing. So can the school district require tests before having staff or students come back? Can we order tests if somebody becomes sick? The answer to those questions is no. We're not able to become a testing center. We did explore it. You have to become something that's called a limited services laboratory. We looked at the criteria for becoming a limited services laboratory, and we do not meet the criteria and the definition, so we're unable to pursue that. We don't have the authority, the medical authority, to order tests. What we will do is, if a student presents with a fever, we will tell you to take your child to the family physician for evaluation. And based on what happens from that evaluation, that will determine what the next steps are. We'll be in contact with our own school physician, Dr. Marino, and we'll be in contact with the health department for those kinds of cases. And we'll take direction from the medical professionals on what the next steps will need to be. Hopefully this will be something that we only encounter sparingly. And if we all are careful about how we conduct our own lives and we try to protect one another, it's our hope that we can keep that instance to a minimum. And the health commissioner said that today on the webinar as well, that he was asked his own view on the reopening of schools, and he had some thoughts on that. But really the thing that's going to make the determination is whether we are all careful about how we go into this fall and the precautions that we all take. So from there, I'd like to just switch back to the classrooms and instruction again for a minute. There are a lot of questions that came through about alternating or switching between virtual instruction and in-person instruction. Who would the teachers be? How frequently can I go back and forth between the two? If I'm quarantining as a precaution, how is instruction taking place? If I'm out for a day or two, what will be the instructional model? So Mr. Cardillo or Dr. Curry, would you like to respond to those questions for us?
Sure. I'll jump in first, and then Teresa, feel free to jump in. You pose a series of questions that are in the what we received from the parents. So how frequently can the child go back and forth? So let's just take it this way. The student starts in the, well, two iterations of this. Student starts in the in-person program early October. The parent says, we would like our child to move into the virtual program. We should be able to turn that around in a couple days so that the student is in the virtual program. Again, our goal is to work with our families in the community. We understand this is a very difficult time. And so that's why we were really in the lead role when we opened up the fact that the parents could have their children go into the virtual program. On the other side of this is that for the students that are currently in the virtual program, while the commitment is for the whole year, what we've done is at the elementary level is say that the first trimester ends in mid-December, second trimester begins on December 14th. So parents with at least 2 weeks of at least no later than 2 weeks of notification, no later than November 30th, would notify one of their child's respective principal that they would like their son or daughter back into the in-person program. The only constraint becomes this is contingent upon space availability in that particular grade level. So there could be instances where, because of social distancing, cap numbers, that we're at the maximum number that child, the parent who requested it for the child, they would not be able to get back into the in-person school. If a opening did take place at some time during the second trimester, we would then create a waiting list and then place that the child into the in-person program, again, if the space was available. For a student who's out for a couple days, we will do the traditional, what we've done always traditionally is that work will be provided for the student to do at home. And I guess the one other item that you mentioned is related to a student who's quarantined. We're working through that. Our belief right now is what we would do is, again, because of the short period of time for the quarantine, we're leaning to really just having that child also have work provided for them at home as we go through this. Because remember, the model that we have in place, we have teachers who are currently teachers who are teaching students on virtual instruction. And some of those classes right now may be already as many as 20 students or so in a particular grade level at a particular school. So we've made the determination as we looked at it as a leadership team just to have students in that instance have work provided to them. Again, we'll continue to review these things, protocols as time goes on, and if need be, we will make some adjustments.
Sure. And as the Board of Education sets the class sizes, in the virtual realm, we are not confined by the social distancing constraints. So you will find your traditional class sizes. For example, kindergarten through third grade would be a maximum of 25 students, grades 4 and 5, 27 students, and so on. The question has come up also in some of these schools where there has been a smaller number of students opting for virtual instruction. The schools have combined, and we may find in this case that your child's teacher may not be a teacher that would be normally assigned to the one particular elementary school, but they will now have an opportunity to work with another Syosset teacher, perhaps from one of their paired elementary schools, and also be in the virtual classroom with other students. The teachers will be very attuned to this, and as far as really wanting to promote the peer relationships, not only between students that would be designated for their home schools together, but also to build those relationships that are cross school, because ultimately the students will be coming together on the middle school level and certainly on the high school level. So please do not have any concerns about that. The teachers are very in tune, not only to the social emotional needs of our children that will be in buildings, but certainly the social emotional needs of the children that are in the virtual platform. There was a question also about the ability for us to provide for Project Beyond. So Project Beyond will take a slightly different modified approach, but it will be starting in grades 4 and 5 early in the school year. And in grade 3, it'll be a little bit later on in the school year. With the particular structure we have in the middle school, Project Beyond will be more of a differentiated approach in the actual classrooms, but rest assured that the students that are designated for Project Beyond enrollment are certainly well known to our teachers as well as to our principals, and they certainly will be getting those additional enrichment experiences as they have traditionally gotten. There was also a question about Meet the Teacher nights and also those type of events in order to maintain social distancing, but give parents the opportunity to engage with teachers, to speak with teachers. We will be holding those conference nights in a virtual platform, but rest assured, while the platform may be different, the ability to connect with the teachers, to get the information you need, as well as to truly understand the academic and instructional experience for the children, all of that information will certainly be conveyed to you. There was one other question regarding the experiences. And as we mentioned before, I just wanted to be sure to reiterate that whether your child is in person, whether your child is in the virtual realm, the actual experience might be slightly modified in order to really make it the best for them, but the ultimate goal, the ultimate learning will certainly be comparable and to the Syosset standards.
So Dr. Curry, you're on a roll. So can you talk, I saw a number of questions in here about remote music, remote art, remote band. How do those work in the virtual world?
Okay, so in order to reimagine how that would happen, and where we're talking about art, so we do have our certified teachers that will be quote unquote pushing into the virtual world to work with students. And as far as supplies go, we will also be working to secure supplies that will be available for distribution on a periodic basis so that the children working from home will have those same experiences to have those artistic expressions. And the same would be with music. It is going to be somewhat of a work in progress as we bring together the students that are in the virtual platform, because there will be a variety of artistic as well as musical talents, but the teachers will be pushing in to provide those very special experiences that truly enrich the students' overall academic learning. The other issue is that the digital world provides us with such amazing opportunities that we might not be able to partake in the in-person world, as many of your children were able to experience back in March through June. So there are often many digital experiences, both with the fine arts and the performing arts, that our teachers have become somewhat experts on, and they'll be able to engage with your children so that they don't miss a beat, no pun intended.
And let me just jump in on that just for one thing. In speaking with Director Michael Salzman, Director of the Music and Fine Arts, he's still in the process of exploring really for the virtual, the students involved in virtual learning, band and orchestra. So he's in the exploration. He's interested in having virtual lessons. He said he has to study really, create lesson groups or include in live lesson groups. And also mentioned the fact what Chris Payne had talked about with the Classroom Go equipment. So he's really in the process of exploring there to make, hopefully make something viable that we could actually have virtual lessons in band and orchestra, but we're not there yet.
And aligned with that as well, there were many questions concerned about the experience our children will have using a Chromebook or a digital platform as compared to the traditional text and document and paper-based. As Ms. Payne mentioned and Mr. Cardillo mentioned, we do have our instruction in place to provide for that balance. So particularly, for example, our Teachers College Reading and Writing project has specific lessons geared towards strengthening student skill sets in both the in-person and hands-on, as well as in the virtual realm. So again, we will be focusing on strengthening students' abilities in both aspects.
Great. So Charlie, lots of questions about kindergartners, kindergarten orientation, doing the assessment of kindergartners before they start school. Can you just walk a brand new kindergarten parent through what they can expect when we get to the end of the summer?
Yeah, I believe what we're setting up is on that September 1st, the kindergarten teachers will be freed up to be able to do exactly what you're talking about. So there'll be notification out related to those, to the children related to that. So the kindergarten teachers on that Tuesday, September 1st, would be all day involved in both the process that you're talking about there.
Yep, we were planned for a wonderful day of kindergarten screening, and we thank all of those new kindergarten and welcome all of our new kindergarten parents. And thank you for working with us in the digital platform as far as uploading all of those documents through Family ID. That's working beautifully. So we're going to be all set to welcome your children. And the day is planned not only to do the kindergarten assessments and to really make sure that we're ready for providing your children with the experiences they need to grow and to thrive, but we've also paid close attention to realizing that this is not only a new experience for all of us in this particular world, but a new experiences for children, the kindergarten children altogether. So we're going to be spending extra time working through the various protocols and making them feel at home in the school, practicing and learning good routines when it comes to health and hygiene, as well as just learning their way around the building and welcoming them into their first experience as children. So again, rest assured that while it may be different if you've had older children go through it, nonetheless, the ultimate goal of the experience of having children really thrive and feel a part of the building, whether they are in person or virtual, we are certainly focused on making sure that happens for them.
And one other thing is we look at physical education, use of gymnasium. There's some questions referencing that. So are the gymnasiums being used for classrooms? So a couple of things on this line. Again, we started by the fact of talking about the extraordinary effort that the principals had to make in order to get everyone back in the building. What that meant is that the gymnasium in most instances is really not being used as a gymnasium. It could be used by one school as an area where there could be 2 or 3 class sections in place, where there may be 10 students in a section in 3 places, maybe in another building project beyond in there. It could be an area where teachers really have been moved from their places to plan and so on. So it could be used in some areas as a storage area. So there's a number of things that could take place, but in many of the areas of the schools, the gymnasium will not be used for physical education purposes. It might be in a couple of the schools the opportunity to do that, but we've done a couple of things. The phys ed teachers on any of the regular weather days, good weather days, will be outside and performing appropriate activities. Drew Cronin, our director, has worked with the physical education staff on that. And the principals are confident too when on the inclement days where physical education teachers will be able to push into the classroom and do different kind of lessons that relate to physical education. And they're confident in that. Could be could be mindfulness. It could be items related to teaming and working as a team. But we're confident whether it be outdoor education for physical education or in the classroom, physical education will go on. And yes, in a couple buildings, they'll likely be able to use their gym space. One other question was, is our outdoor classrooms a possibility? Yeah, those kind of things are always a possibility. And principals have talked about that. And in some cases, we would likely see in good weather days, that there could be some classes going outside for outdoor education.
And along the line of education, whether it's in the physical education realm or in the classroom, there are typically supplies that are used. So there's been a lot of inquiry as to school supply lists. So if you have not received those lists yet, rest assured they will be coming your way. The teachers are working closely with the building principals to make sure that those supply lists are not only exactly what the children need, but also that we're minimizing the sharing of supplies. So oftentimes students will, hold their own and have containers and bags, so to speak, to make sure that their supplies are not being shared. But when there is a need to share supplies, rest assured that there will be disinfected and sanitization before being passed from one child to another. There was a question about students holding on to their coats, holding on to their materials. So as a result of minimizing, or rather maximizing space available, we will be looking towards having the children keep their personal belongings with them in their personal space throughout the day. So perhaps their coats might be on the back of their chairs. They will keep their book bags with them, tucked in a neat and safe place so they have access to their materials. But there's no chance that there is interconnection with other children and so on. But please rest assured, in the younger classrooms, we have monitors to help the children there, as well as putting things in a safe place, and that they won't be distracting to them in their learning environment or be disturbed or damaged in any way.
Great. So I keep taking the fun stuff. I'll talk a little bit about temperature scanning, and then I'll talk a little bit about masks. So we are going to be taking student temperatures on the way into school. For sure, we will have the school nurse with an infrared touchless thermometer taking student temperatures as they arrive. We will also be investing in walkthrough scanning equipment. So that will also expedite the entry to the buildings. We're trying to make that not something that turns into a bottleneck, but something that goes as quickly as possible. In every building, we've identified an isolation space so that if for some reason a student is feeling unwell or they have a temperature, we have a place to isolate them safely. One of the things that Mr. Hamilton's team is doing is in all of the nursing spaces and the isolation spaces, they're installing what are called negative pressure ventilation systems. And that means that the air in these rooms is exhausted out of the building and not into the rest of the building. So that air will be evacuated from that building, and that's what the negative pressure implies. That's our top priority in the HVAC world. In terms of masks, we want to have a conservative approach, an approach that stresses safety over inconvenience, frankly, because if our choices are between discomfort and disease, we'll choose discomfort. And that's to keep everyone safe, including our young people. So I know that there's been a lot of reporting in the media in the last week or so about the relative effectiveness of various materials for masks. That stems from a single study. I'm imagining that more studies are going to be coming out. What we'll do is likely make a decision closer to the start of school rather than make a decision and change it and change it and change it. When we get closer to the start of school, we'll take stock of where things are. These are decisions that we make in conjunction with the school physician and the Center for School Health, which advises all the schools in New York State, 700 school districts, on these kinds of health decisions. So we'll make that decision on what the appropriate materials for masks will be. The district, for its own stockpile of masks, has surgical masks, paper surgical masks. Those have always been found to be very effective as masks. We'll have plenty of masks available in individual classrooms, spares for teachers, spares if a student forgets, loses, sneezes into their mask and needs a replacement mask. We'll have masks in adult sizes and pediatric sizes. They'll be immediately available. Teachers will have them in their room, and we'll have additional stores of masks in every main office of every building. So the mask supply will be available. But for masks that you're bringing from home, we'll issue some guidance as we get a little bit closer to the school year. It is possible, it is conceivable that there are some students who have a medical condition that might constrain their use of a mask as personal protective equipment, and they may need an accommodation of a different form of personal protective equipment. The way to get that mask accommodation is to go through something called the 504 process. This is a medical process. It goes through Dr. Lamel's office. It has to be completed before the start of school, and it has to be evaluated by the 504 committee, the school physician, before any accommodation is given. And the accommodation may be the substitution of alternate PPE for the mask. For staff, the face shields are available for staff who wish a face shield, but the guidance from the state says that a face shield cannot substitute for a mask. So it can be an addition to, but it can't be a replacement for. So if there are staff who have particular health needs, they've already been advised to talk to our Human Resources Department, headed for the next couple of weeks at least by Dr. Curry, to have the conversation about how we can keep them safe and what equipment is available to them. What happens if students are not compliant with the mask policy? The board at its last meeting last Monday adopted a change to our code of conduct. Wearing a mask is now part of the code of conduct, and failure to comply with the code of conduct will result in disciplinary consequences. And that is true for the adults as well as the students. So the code of conduct is basically the laws of the land when you're on school district property, and everyone is expected and must follow the code of conduct. What will breaks look like? We're still working through this. We know that the guidance permits students to take breaks. We want those breaks to be very limited in duration so that the likelihood that a student would be judged to be a close contact is very small. And we want to make sure that we do it in a conservative fashion so that we have as few students with masks off simultaneously as possible, so that the risk they pose to one another is as low as it can possibly be. So we'll be giving the teachers more direction about how to do these as we get, again, closer to school. There's been some iteration of thought around the optimal way of doing this. And again, we're waiting for advice on this from the Center for School Health and our school physician. Questions have been asked about whether lanyards can be worn so that the mask is on a necklace around someone's neck and then doesn't have to be placed on a surface. That's absolutely acceptable. We'll be doing training for both staff and students on the proper way to wear a mask, the proper way to put a mask on, and the proper way to take a mask off. It's important to grab the mask by the ear loops and not to touch the front of the mask if it can be at all avoided. So we've also been asked questions about quarantining for out-of-state visits. There's very specific guidance on the New York State Department of Health website. If someone is in another state that is on the quarantine list, very briefly, such as passing through, and it lists out explicitly, passing through, stopped at a rest stop, or in a waiting room of an airport, that 24 hours would not count, but any other visit out of state would count. And coming back and getting a negative test would not release you from the 14-day quarantine. So how will parents learn about this? This is going to be one of the things that we'll be communicating to parents as we get closer to the start of school and we are within that 14-day window. We'll start to issue some reminders to parents so that they know what to expect and they know how the rules will be enforced. How will we know if someone was out of state? We won't necessarily know. This is where we have to make decisions that keep each other safe. And this guidance is an executive order. It has the force of law. People are expected to follow it. I don't know what the civil consequences are for not following the state law, but it is a law and it has to be observed. Yes, Charlie.
Yeah, I just want to go back earlier on one of the items, sorry to interrupt you, just on the temperature scanning devices, because I want the parents to understand the amount of time that's being given to it by the building administration along with the district administration. So what we're doing is we're doing walkthroughs on site at each of the 7 schools. We met today with one of the principals for around an hour with our head of security, myself, and the principal, and a couple other people involved. So as we do these, we'll either have 2 or 3 of these temperature scanning or fever scanning devices at the elementary schools. One at the main entrance in this particular school, 2 at the side entrances. So that would be for a total of 3. But the change would be for parents and really where we really need people to all really support what the principals will be putting in writing in this particular school the students coming off the buses will go right to the main entrance and go through the temperature scanning device there. But students who are either walk to school with their parents or being dropped off by their parents by car, they'll be going to a side entrance and then they'll go through the temperature scanning device there. Again, what we said is we're going to continue to evaluate for each of the schools with the principals, providing support to the principals as we work through this, because we anticipate a number of people being dropped off by parents, by their children dropped off by car. So we're trying to work these out on a school by school basis, and we ask, and I'm sure our parents will appreciate when those guidelines come home from the principals, that they respect those as we go through it. And the same with dismissal time as we get to that and we work out details. So we're not having such congestion that it's frustrating to parents, it's frustrating to the students, it's frustrating to the people in the community, and so on. So just a little involved so people can see the behind the scenes look as to what we're doing in order to prepare for the opening day and beyond.
Great, thank you for that. Dr. Curry, can you just talk a little bit about the SCOPE program? I know parents are worried about before and after care.
Sure. We've been working very closely with the administrators of SCOPE. They have actually been running a child care program throughout this summer for our parents that are first responders. And what's wonderful is they have now become experts at running these before and after care programs. They have their routines down. It's really running very well. In fact, we've been meeting with them to learn a little bit about their experiences so that we can be better prepared for the students that are coming in during the day. But we will continue to run SCOPE both before school and after school for our kindergarten through 5th grade students. It will be available at all 7 of our elementary schools. There are some schools that the enrollment is already at a very high level. SCOPE, the organization, maintains and oversees all of the enrollments in their program. They will eventually reach a cap as to the number of students that they are able to accommodate. In several of our elementary schools, they were informing us just this morning that they are very close to that cap. So if enrollment in the SCOPE before school or after school program is something that you are interested in, but have not pursued yet or have registered yet, it would definitely be advisable to reach out to them. They have their website that is very easy and user-friendly in order to secure a spot for your child both before or after school. But again, they will be aligning with all of the safety guidelines that we are implementing for during the school day, and they are very much interested in also providing a wonderful experience. The program of SCOPE will be slightly modified. It will be less of an active program and more of one that will be focused on individual educational but enriching activities during the time that the children are there, either before school or after school.
Great, thank you for that. I want to talk a little, there are a lot of questions about how will decisions be made around school closures necessarily. So I didn't hear the governor's press conference, but my understanding is that yesterday he reiterated something that he had said earlier in the summer, that is that if there is any region-wide closures, those region-wide closures will be decided by his office. So he has said earlier in the summer that if we had less than a 5% positivity rate among people who are tested for COVID, that he would reopen schools. That positivity rate in Nassau County has been below 1% for over a week now and has been hovering at 1% for a number of weeks. So we're not close to the 5%. So it was not a big surprise that the governor said that he would allow schools to reopen. He also said at the same time that if the positivity rate rose to 9%, that would be the point at which they would close schools. So what he said yesterday apparently is that the decision about doing region-wide closures would fall to his office to make. Obviously, if there are decisions that need to be made at the school district or at the building or at the classroom level, those would be decisions that we would make, but we would make those in conjunction with the health department. It would be our decision, but we would do it with the support and advice of the health department, and we would have to have a solid rationale, a medical rationale for why we made the decision that we made. And again, we'll be looking to the health department to help us determine what the risks are and what the right and best response is to accommodate those risks. So obviously we'll have to, we're all hoping that this rate of positivity stays as low as it has been. Dr. Eisenstein said today that there's very little community transmission, that the transmission that they are seeing is in the young adult population. The implication being that these young adults are taking more risks, and that because they're taking more risks, those risks are exposing them to more danger. But the general rate of transmission in the population at large, if you set those cases aside, is very low. So obviously these are young adults that need to make good decisions on behalf of the community as well. But you know, we'll see how that progresses as things go forward. That leads to questions about returning to school and how to return to school if someone, an individual is diagnosed as positive, or if there's a cluster of cases. There is some discrepancy between the guidance that we were given by the Department of Health and the CDC. So right now, our understanding is that the Department of Health is the controlling guidance, but we have asked for clarification on whether someone needs to have a negative test after testing positive before they can come back. So that's still in a little bit of doubt, but I'm certain that that will be cleared up long before we get to the start of school. And whatever that updated guidance is, we will update our own FAQ accordingly so that people are kept up to speed on what the right procedures are. And we, of course, will try very hard to follow all the right procedures as we understand them. I'm just, again, looking through some of the questions here, and Charlie, I'm seeing some questions around homeroom spaces and the breaks that students will have as they're in their classroom. Obviously, especially young children need to be able to move. Can you talk a little bit about what that typical day might look or feel like?
Okay, let's just go. Yeah, so let's just, as we're looking at that related to the homeroom spaces, as a child gets into the class, they still will have they'll have their mask on, but there can be socialization taking place during that period of time that you're referencing. It's really as the day moves on, for the most part, the children, the way it's set up at the elementary school, will be based in their one classroom for most of the day. The exception would be with after lunch, they go off for recess, and then after recess, they come back to the class. And then for the most part, when we'll have special area teachers, then that would be pushing in to the classroom as opposed to the children moving. We have, so that in essence is, I mean, when we're talking about young children being able to move around, the opportunity comes when they have that lunchtime in the class. They're not necessarily moving around, but it's still a more relaxed atmosphere in that the child has their mask off, they're eating, they could be talking to their classmate that's 6 feet to the left, 6 feet to the right, and so on during that period of time. So parents shouldn't have to look at that to say, oh my goodness, it's not like the cafeteria where actually in the cafeteria where they're sitting bunched on one another and doing what young children do. In this case, they still have the opportunity during that lunch period in the classroom to still have socialization, but it would be socialization with social distancing involved.
Great. Thank you for that. I'm just looking through these questions to see other themes that we have missed. Dr. Rufo, on busing, the questions have come up about opting in and opting back out of busing.
Yes, when we sent our survey out, we did indicate that parents, if they did opt out in the beginning, that there would be opportunities throughout the year for parents to change their mind. It would take some time to readjust the routes, but parents could change that designation throughout the year.
Okay, we had a question about standardized exams. These are the English and math assessments that the state administers in grades 3 through 8. They were canceled for this past spring. Those are actually federal exams. The requirement to do those exams is a federal requirement. The federal government did relax that requirement this past spring, and the State Board of Regents made the decision not to administer those exams. The federal government, to my knowledge, has not relaxed that requirement for this year yet. The exams typically happen in the spring, so there's clearly some time before they absolutely have to do that. And as soon as we know what the federal government is going to do, then the next question will be whether the State Board of Regents decides to take advantage of that flexibility or not. And as soon as we know, we'll let you know. Parenthetically, I realize this is our elementary meeting, but the other large assessment regime in New York State is the Regents exams at the high school level. No decisions have been made about Regents exams yet. This last year, the Regents exams were canceled and AP exams were held online. I think there's been a lot of evaluation of how the online experience for the AP exams worked, and the Board of Regents has not made any decisions about Regents exams that are going to be end of year exams yet either. Although typically, in addition to the exams that are given in June, there's a group of Regents exams that occurs in January. And so that'll be something that the board will, not our board, the Board of Regents will have to decide, I think sooner rather than later, so that we can plan instruction for those students who might be potentially taking a Regents exam in January. Couple questions about, yes, Charlie.
Well, maybe you could just go through, we were having a conversation today, because parents, as we look at you're talking about recess and playgrounds, and maybe you want to just talk about that to our parents on the use of, yeah.
Well, I'll let you talk about recess and I'll talk about playgrounds. How's that?
I like that. Okay, so yes, okay. And we talked about in my opening comments that obviously recess will go on. It'll be different than what the children have experienced. But again, there still can be a fun, joyous experience at recess with appropriate, that will have, the typical supervision that's out there, and social distancing in place. Playgrounds?
So playgrounds, we've gotten questions about how we keep playground equipment safe. So the CDC actually has explicit guidance on what to do with playground equipment. And that guidance says that it should be cleaned if it becomes soiled, but it should not be disinfected. Their point is that it's a waste of disinfectant and it's not effective. So we're following that CDC guidance. We haven't been given any contrary guidance from the state. Will students be allowed to use the playground equipment? Yes. Will it be cleaned? Yes. Will it be disinfected? No, per the CDC's guidance.
And as far as the children using all of these and participating in all of these activities, please keep in mind also that they will be in smaller groups with one another, and each of those groups will be assigned a monitor or an adult teacher supervisor. So please don't be concerned about who will be out there helping to enforce social distancing. In keeping with all of the space parameters, we will actually be having more adults on hand to really take care of the children and make sure that they're having a fun, safe, and socially distant experience.
And so, Charlie, a handful of questions about what the first couple of days of school are going to look like. Can you just take us through the opening days and how we've scheduled those opening days so parents have a sense of what to expect?
Okay, great. So we really took, the leadership team has spent a lot of time on this. So we made the determination that that on day one, on September 1, it'll simply be that we have our kindergarten and first grade students coming to school on that day.
Charlie, I'm going to interrupt you and say it's September 8th, not September 1.
Yes, thank you very much. But I was just checking to make sure everyone on the panel was still alert to what my comments were. So yes, it'll be September 8th. Thank you. I thought you were going to say I was mute. I was not at a turn on my mute. Okay, so yes, it's September 8th. And everyone, the principals are enthusiastic about this. Our teachers are enthusiastic about this. It gives our youngsters, our kindergartners and our first graders, who a number of people feel were shortchanged last year because of the mid-March with school ending. So it gives the opportunity then for the teachers to go through a number of different protocols during that time, from hand washing to even talking about other kind of things to help them really get a sense of really each of the as we go through the school day, what for the children to expect and so on. And more importantly, it won't be a frenetic pace because the grade 2 through 5 students won't be in the building. So the teachers, I think, will feel very comfortable. Our students will feel very comfortable. We go to day 2. Day 2, we switch it around. Day 2, we have our grade 2 through 5 students in. And what we'll do then for the kindergarten students, I think we're anticipating is that we will have them be on a virtual day on that particular day. More to be discussed on that related to the K-1 students, but that was initially what we have discussed. And the grade 2 to 5 students will come in. And again, we'll do similar things for the teachers that day. And the two things that there's a number of positives there. It gives us time to assess really with our bus transportation. It gives us time to assess related to parent drop-off. It gives us time to assess what we're doing at dismissal time. And it gives the same thing when we have now the 4 grade levels in grade 2 to 5, the students who have been really veterans in the school, so to speak, particularly the upperclassmen for grade 4 or 5, where they have the opportunity then to have the building to themselves on that day. The teachers working through different aspects of what they're doing as the pilot and co-pilot. And then on that Thursday and Friday of that week, we're back to, that's now on September 10th and 11th, on that Thursday and Friday, we'll have all the children in, and beginning on that September 10th and going forward, that's our all in-person program. And we think it's, some other districts have also approached this in a similar manner as they look to really phase this in for the students during an extraordinary period of time.
Right. So if you think about this, there's 6 grade levels at an elementary school. So on the first day of school, a third of the
Yes.
students will be in. On the second day of school, 2/3 of the students will be in. And on the third day of school, 3/3 or all of the students will be in. Again, because of the uncertainties around busing, we're not sure what busing is going to look like and how many parents are actually going to take advantage of the bus, notwithstanding how many have opted out. This will give us a sense with just 1/3 of the students on what the bus utilization is. It will also give us a sense with just 1/3 of the students what traffic patterns look like with a lot of cars and drop-offs. On the second day, we'll end up doubling, obviously, the number of students presumably on the bus, and doubling in all likelihood the number of cars that we have to accommodate. But it will give our teams a chance to assess what's going on. It'll also give us a chance to assess how quickly we can move through the temperature scanning process at the start of the day, and how quickly we'll be able to, hopefully we don't have to isolate anyone, but it's better to run through that first isolation with fewer people so that we have a sense of how smoothly it will run before we try to do that if there's a complete building and everyone is trying to enter at the same time. So it gives us a chance to run through these protocols where we don't have a crush of people, where it will be easier to do social distancing. And especially with our K-1 students, we know we're going to have to spend time with them to train them, to explain how this works, to make sure that they understand social distancing. We're going to want to do some fire drills, the ability to be able to do a socially distanced fire drill with the K-1 students on that first day so that there's not tremendous numbers of people trying to evacuate the building simultaneously. We're trying to make this a really safe, cautious start to school. So I do realize that it's going to result in the need for some childcare on the first 2 days, alternating depending on when your students are. I apologize for that inconvenience, but I think that inconvenience is, weighed against having an orderly, a safe, a careful start to school is the right decision. So I wanted to make sure that that was aware. That's going to be going out from your buildings in future guidance, but I wanted to at least make sure we addressed it here.
And can I just jump in one more time, and I apologize. It's just from a parent lens, okay? I would say that I think, I have 6 sons. I can remember my twins, the youngest of 2, when they started school, there was anxiety, and it's a lot different today. So I think by doing the K-1 separately, I think parents will feel more comfortable. The children will feel more comfortable. They're not in that sense of there's another, a couple hundred students that they have to worry about that day, and they can go in. And we understand there'll probably be some students, just like my twins on day 2. They didn't want to go to school on day 2. Mrs. Cardillo called the principal that my twins were crying hysterically. She drove them down to the school, and she got out of the car to talk to the principal, and the twins locked the doors, and Mrs. Cardillo had to find the keys to get them out of the car, crying. And the principal, as our 7 principals would do, they hugged them, and the social worker was there. And on that day, I'm thinking about our children coming here. We will be able to do similar things for students who are anxious and so on, and provide the kind of support and care that we would like to see and that we've done in the past can continue on this day. And by having a smaller number of kids, I think it'll be really well received by everyone involved.
Great. So we've come to the end of our time. I want to just talk about how we're going to proceed from here. There are a lot of questions. We have already started to organize these questions by theme and then put them into an FAQ document. That FAQ document, I'm hoping we'll be able to publish later in the week as we put the answers into the document. It'll be similar to the answers that you've heard tonight. The questions are the ones that we've been answering tonight. So we will also leave the links open. So if more questions roll in, we'll be able to iterate the FAQ documents if there's something new that comes in that wasn't addressed or wasn't asked in the past. I will say, although we were doing our very best and very hardest work of trying to think of every last thing as we go towards reopening, we also know that something this complicated is unlikely to be perfect on the first try. So we're going to be very agile in these first handful of days of school to try and make sure that we do the best possible job we can. That may mean that things will shift quickly. We hope you can be agile with us so that we can make it the best experience for everyone. Second point is that I've been telling our staff, the leadership team, and I was telling the task force, it's my own view that we are 5 months into what is probably going to be an 18-month crisis. And I know we're all fatigued. I know our team is fatigued, and I know that the public is fatigued from the rigors of quarantine and isolation and being, all of us, forced out of our regular and comfortable lives into all of the requirements that we have to observe in order to try and be safe. And it's easy to run out of stamina for all of these changes, but we can't let ourselves run out of stamina too soon. We're going to have to be able to power through this next year. If something good happens on the health front and I'm wrong and it's not 18 months, I'll be the happiest person. We'll all be the happiest people on earth. But we need to plan as though this is going to be something that is our new normal for the coming year. And we have to have the stamina to keep doing the things that we need to do to keep one another safe, even after it becomes tiresome, even after it becomes boring and inconvenient and uncomfortable. I do think that hopefully when this is well in our rear view mirrors, this will be a time in history that we will look back on, that our children will look back on. Our children will tell their grandchildren about the crazy times of the pandemic that they lived through as 4th graders. And we will all hopefully say to one another that it was our greatest test as a community, as educators, and that we rose to the challenge of this great test. So avoid complacency. Obviously, there's a lot of work left to be done in order to do this. We look forward to seeing you and to seeing your children as soon as we can. And we'll try to keep you as apprised as we possibly can as we go along of the changes that we're making. And as we have more answers to some of these more granular questions, we'll feed them into the FAQ. But some of these questions we won't have figured out ourselves until we get a little bit closer to the start of school. So I know there are a lot of people on this Zoom this evening. I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate your attention. We thank you so very much for your support of the work that we've been doing. It really is our pleasure and our privilege to serve this community, and we're proud to do it. So thank you, everybody. Stay safe. Have a good night.